Hello and welcome to Kaizen Institute 40th Anniversary Leadership Series. As we mark 4 decades of championing Kaizen, also known as continuous improvement, we are honored to feature leaders who embody its spirit, not as a buzzword, but as lived commitment to learning transformation and people-first leadership. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Mr. Piyush Gupta, former CEO of DBS and now Chairman of Singapore Management University and Deputy Chairman of Keppel Corporations. Under his visionary leadership, DBS evolved from what some once joked was damn bloody slow into one of the world's most innovative and respected banks. Named Best Bank in the world by Euromoney, Global Finance and The Banker over multiple years, and recently recognized as the world's best bank for the 3rd time since 2019. DBS was also listed among Harvard Business Review's top 10 most transformative companies of the decade. What many may not realize is that his transformation was deeply rooted in Kaizen principles, from waste elimination to customer-centric redesign to fostering psychological safety, cross-functional ownership and culture of curiosity and experimentation. Let's start with at the beginning. Before DBS, you spent over 2 decades with Citi, including leadership roles across Southeast Asia and the global markets. What early experience shaped the way you lead today?
Very well. First of all, it's a pleasure doing this for the Kaizen Institute. But to your specific question, I'll talk to 2 things. One is, what experiences allowed me to think a little bit in process terms. You know, when I joined Citi in India, they had a management trainee program which pushed people into operations and technology for the first few years. And in hindsight, that experience was invaluable. It gave me a process orientation. And it gave me a recognition that customer experience is important, but a large part of customer experience outcomes can be driven by a good focus on process. The second thing it did was it gave me a focus on innovation. Citibank in those days used to pride itself on running 6 monthly workshops where they brought some of the young kids to think proactively about how you could make and drive change. And the third thing it did for me is help me focus on people. It was a unionized environment, and to get outcomes, you had to learn to work with unions and with people much older than you. So some of the skill sets I developed came in my first few years in Citibank. Now, obviously, over the years, as I got more senior, you acquire other kinds of leadership skills. The ability to combine strategy with execution, the ability to bring technology to bear. These were some of the other things I picked up in my Citibank tenure. I worked in several countries, and so an understanding of cultural nuance and how people matter, that came along as well.
Thank you. Next question. When you stepped into the DBS role in 2009, the bank was often seen as bureaucratic and slow. Under your leadership, it evolved into one of the most respected financial institutions globally. What was your vision for DBS when you first came on board?
Actually, truth be told, my vision was very prosaic, quite pedestrian. Looking from the outside, it seemed to me that there were opportunities from a strategy prism. I thought DBS had a fantastic pedigree. It was owned by, 30% owned by Temasek. It was in Singapore, right part of the world, but had been underperforming. And I thought there were certain businesses and lines of business DBS could build out. So I had a strategy view. I certainly had an execution view. Because even though DBS had professed to be an Asia-centric bank, in the couple of years before I joined, it was obvious from outside that they had lost direction. They took a lot of hits in the global financial crisis. They had exposures in the Middle East and Europe, which were not aligned to strategy. So execution orientation was the second thing I knew you could fix relatively early. And my third prism when I came in was a general idea that customer experience could be much better. I'll tell you a story. Shortly before I joined, I was walking around at Takashimaya, and I suddenly saw this queue which went all around the floor, and all people lined up to go to the teller counter. And so I walked the queue to ask people why they were there. And it just struck me that people were standing in the queue for an hour and a half because they didn't have an ATM card. And so I had the sense that there was a big opportunity around thinking about customer experience and customer journeys. But that was about it. I didn't have any other grander vision than that when I got started.
Well, thank you. I had a chance to interview Paul Coban, which is your former DBS Data Transformation Officer. He shared that the transformation in DBS actually really starts with your intent to change. How people saw DBS and how he drew inspiration from our founder, Mr. Imai, during his visit to Japanese factories. That led to the RED program and what became known as PIE, Kaizen style workshop focused on walking the Gemba, mapping the pain points and breaking the silos. So what made you embrace this method of transformation?
Well, I'd had some experience to lean principles, to GE lean and to Kaizen in my Citibank days. You know, we had worked on various projects around re-engineering, and in the early part of the century, I had actually driven the re-engineering agenda for Citibank in Asia using some of these principles. So I did have some experience to continuous improvement at that stage. But as I said, when I joined, I decided that one of the first things I would focus on was to try and fix the customer reputation and the customer experience. And so this was in my mind that I needed to fix both the hardware and the software. By hardware, I meant it was quite clear very early that our processes were broken, and so we'd have to address that. The software was about heart. In my first few months, I realized that the DBS culture had got to a stage where it was very internally focused. So we were driven by policy, we were driven by compliance, we were not driven by customer outcome. So that was the software. How do you change the mindset of people to really be driven by customer outcome? The approach for the hardware was just opportunistic. I was doing my early rounds around the system. I happened to walk into a room where Paul Coban was conducting a PIE workshop on a particular project. Turned out that he had just started the PIE process, and this was the third project that they were doing. They had the classic post-its all over the wall. They had a team of people looking at the pain points. And I, because of my experience and background, spent half an hour trying to understand what project they were trying to do. And as soon as I got my mind around it, I said, look, this is a fantastic approach. Now, the PIE approach Paul was using was effectively Kaizen or GE, but he had crafted a specific 5-day program to focus on getting outcomes. And I said, fine, this looks like as good an approach as any other to deal with the hardware. And so I asked them what their ambition was. And they said the ambition was to do a half a dozen projects that year. And I just changed the ambition. I said I want to see 50 projects in the course of this year, because I wanted to scale up this idea of having a process orientation. But then I also told Paul that a process orientation would not be enough. We had to also change the hearts of people. So I charged him to say, why don't we start collectively working with people to come up with the service value proposition? What should our service values be? What should we aim to be in the minds of the customer? And Paul and team took that to heart. So instead of crafting it by themselves, they crowdsourced. So we wound up having a 2-day workshop. We had 1,000 people, and we went deep into what does it mean to have an Asian kind of service, a differentiated service. And on the back of that, we came up with RED, to be respectful, to be easy to deal with, and to be dependable. So these became my twin engines, the process improvement engine and the heart engine through the RED program. And Paul and team did a fantastic job driving these across the company.
And I can more or less empathize with what you share. And ultimately, within Kaizen Institute, we always talk about, in the Chinese saying, right, the yin and the yang. So a lot of companies, they focus on the hard stuff, but not the soft stuff. Well, thank you, Piyush. Maybe I'll progress to the next question. You once said culture probably is the most important part of organizational transformation. How did you go about building a culture where people feel safe to ask questions, speak up, and give feedback, where learning and experimentation are the norm?
So Ferry, let me tell you something which I did not know, and I learned along the way, and it was one of my best insights looking back, Monday morning quarterbacking. This focus on the customer that I had launched was good for the customer, but the more powerful outcome of that was, this is what changed the culture of DBS. As soon as people realized that they had the freedom to do things, if it made sense for the customer, it changed their mindset. So there's always been this big debate, do employees come first or do customers come first? For me, the answer is quite unequivocal. The only way you can change employee mindsets is by driving the customer centricity. And so to me, the biggest secret weapon was this: by focusing on the customer, I changed the employees. Right? So that is the first big insight. But that's not all. I mean, you have to do other things as well. So along the way, again, Paul and team, they started experimenting and coming up with behavior change enablers. So they call the beans, behavior enablers and nudges. How do you create a set of mechanisms to help people behave differently? And so we came up with many nudges, many beans. I'll give you two examples, right? So the first was, in our talking to people, it was quite clear that in meetings, we weren't productive. People weren't asking questions, people weren't participating. It was a hippo meeting, the highest paid person in the room, opinion held. And so the team came up with this idea of mojo, which is that every team should have a MO, a meeting owner, but the meeting should also have a Joe, which is a joyful observer, which basically means for every meeting you have to name somebody who was a critique, an observer of the meeting. And the job of the Joe was to constantly observe how the meeting is going. Are people participating? Are people asking questions? Are people distracted? Is there an equal share of voice? And then give an assessment at the end of the meeting. In one of my early meetings, I was the meeting owner, and we appointed a young girl as the Joe, and halfway through the meeting, I lost my temper, after which the meeting shut down. CEO loses temper, nobody talks. So at the end of the meeting, Joe had to give a critique, and I could see her heart was in her mouth, but she took courage and said, this is the worst meeting I have ever attended, because after Piyush lost his temper, nothing happened. Now by then I had cooled down, and I made her a hero. I said, this is what we need, people who are willing to even question the CEO if it is appropriate. This idea that it's okay to be a Joe, to critique and to question, started gathering root. So we then came up with this other bean, a raccoon. It's spelled with a W, W-R-E-C-K-O-O-N. But it's accompanied by the animal, the raccoon. So just to gamify it and make it fun. But the idea behind the raccoon was that in everything we do, in our presentations, in our thinking, in our product, from time to time a raccoon would pop up. And when the raccoon popped up, everybody had to stop and ask the contrarian question. What can go wrong? What could wreck this idea? What could wreck this, all our thinking? It became so powerful that raccoon became a verb in DBS. So people would say, okay, I'm asking a raccoon question. And the minute you said raccoon question, then nobody can question you for asking it. So it started creating the confidence and psychological safety, saying it's okay to ask if it's a raccoon question. So these kinds of nudges are quite important in slowly creating the culture where people are willing to push back, to voice an opinion. But it's not just that. We ran specific programs. In 2016, if I remember, my KPI for the company was to run 1,000 experiments. And we taught everybody how to experiment with A/B testing. And the idea behind that 1,000 experiments was I was fully convinced 80% of the experiments would either be trivial or fail. But I wanted to give people the confidence to say it is okay to try, even if you fail. The next year, the KPI for the company was to run 250 journeys. I told all my 2 downs, everybody must run a journey this year, either an employee journey or a customer journey. So that to learn how to interview, to storyboard, to run through the whole process. I even trained the board, to do journey thinking over 2 days.
Wow.
So it's a whole set of actions, right? You have to create programs of change, I call them. And then slowly this begins to start becoming accepted parlance. People start getting greater confidence in the fact that the culture permits you to ask. I'll tell you another program I ran. I created an anonymous email forum called Ask Piyush or Tell Piyush. Every quarter, I'd open it up for 2 weeks, completely anonymous. Anybody in the company could ask me or tell me whatever they wanted. And in the beginning, it was all anonymous. Over the years, as people found I was serious about it, I took the suggestions on board, I tried to implement it. People started putting their names on it because they now had the confidence to say, hey, something comes of this. So it's not one thing. It's a collective that you need to work at if you want to drive a change in behaviors.
Wow. Thank you for the insightful sharing. And for the viewer out there, the bonus question, how long does it take for you to see that change? Because there's some tipping point, right? I believe there will be a period of time.
Yeah. So first of all, it's not a journey that's ever done. You have to keep working at it, and it's very easy to slip. But to me, the main tipping point comes when you're beginning to hear the language and you're beginning to hear ideas which were not generated by you.
Okay.
In the early days, a lot of it was pushed down. By 2016-17, I started hearing all kinds of programs and ideas that people were doing all over the system. And that's when you know that you hit tipping point where the culture change has got traction of its own.
Yeah. Wow. And I recall sharing from Susan that you are someone who is very consistent in messaging. And I believe that is also one of the key things that you have done.
Well, actually, yes, communication is critical. It's the value of communication is often underrated or lost. And you have to keep the communication simple in everyday language. You have to package it and you have to be consistent. You have to be consistent. If you keep changing the storyline and keep changing the message, people go blur. So you have to be consistent with it.
Wow. Okay. After 15 years, you pass the baton to Susan, right? When you reflect on your journey, how do you define legacy? Not just in terms of performance, but the kind of system, values, and culture you leave behind?
That's a great question, Ferry, because frankly, I don't define legacy in terms of performance. Performance goes up and down with cycles. I do define legacy in respect of the three things you mentioned. So values, culture, systems, and a fourth, which is people. In terms of values, I think that is mission critical. A sense of purpose, of intent, what is true north, and ability to bind the individual employee's agenda with a corporate agenda and the belief that you're making impact. That's really important, an important part of legacy. I was fortunate I didn't have to create that. That existed at DBS before I came. I was a steward for it, I helped modify it, shape it. But this whole notion of purpose, of doing things for a real need, for a greater good, it came from DBS's origin as a development bank. And we just took it and continued to work on that you must be doing real things for real people, bring value. The second part of legacy is what you said is about culture. I think that's really important. Because when you start thinking about culture, culture stays for a long time. Right? And you have to first recognize the culture that exists, but you also have to try and shape the culture that you want. Again, early in my tenure, we polled a lot of people saying, what is the soul of DBS? What is our culture today that you like? What are the gaps in our culture that we would like to have? And we came up with some elements. We said we are an intent-driven company, that's good. We are a very collaborative company. We don't fight among each other, that's good. So those two things, collaboration and intent, should be in our culture. But we had some gaps. We weren't very innovative. We were not very decisive. We believed in systems making decisions. And we weren't a fun company. And so we said we've got to build these capabilities. How do you create a decisiveness, accountability, innovation, have a more spirit of fun? And we worked studiously at creating this over the years. Today's DBS has those elements. in its culture. And to me, if we can continue to do that, which is, the elements of being an impact-oriented fun company, that would be legacy. The third part is correctly systems. Now, finally, what keeps cultures in place, what keeps things in place is the way of working. You have to have a set of systems which define and make it possible, saying this is how we work. Some years ago, we took DBS on a journey to start doing what we call MTJ, managing through journeys, managing by journeys, right? And that was effectively converting the companies working from vertical silos into horizontal. Using a flywheel, being data driven, using experimentation, using artificial intelligence and data. All of these are part of a flywheel which is now deeply embedded in how work happens, right? How dashboards use the MIS, how people experiment. If you can actually define a way of working, that will outlast you. And that will stay for long periods of time. To me, that is legacy. And finally, like I said, the legacy around people, an environment where you build your own timber. You work hard at identifying talent and growing talent, where you can actually have a whole succession pipeline of people who are future leaders. That's an important part of legacy. Today, I'm actually so pleased that of the big CEO type positions in Singapore, at least 3-4 of them are from the DBS stable. Now OCBC most recently, Singlife earlier, the Citibank Singapore CEO, all from the DBS stable. So that is legacy as well.
Wow, fantastic. Now let's move on to leadership beyond the executive chair. You recently transitioned from being a CEO of DBS to taking on non-executive leadership role, such as chairman of SMU, chairman of Mandai Park Holdings, and now deputy chairman of Keppel. How has your leadership lens changed now that you no longer are in an operational role?
So Ferry, first of all, I have to say, honestly, it's too early to say because I've been in these roles for, barely months. And truth be told, I'm also still learning, how to transition from an active CEO role to a chairman role. But I've had a very good role model. So my chairman at DBS, Peter Siap, played the chairman role to perfection. He was a very helpful mentor and steward. He gave a lot of guidance in the things that matter. So the culture we are able to create at DBS, he was a big part of that. The capacity to innovate, to take risk, to have a sense of family, to have fun. Peter drove that. If the board had not been supportive of building that culture, we wouldn't have been able to build it. The second thing that Peter did was always weighed in at a general level on strategy. Management formed and came up with the strategy, but the board finally approved strategy. And Peter's sense for what was okay, what was not okay, pacing, the environment, that was very helpful as well. So from the role modeling, I'm hoping to be able to take those attributes into my own leadership style. Be a steward and a mentor for management teams, help them think through the strategy challenges, help them try and shape a culture that is going to be long lasting, but give them enough elbow room and execution ability to impress their own personalities and run companies in the way that they should be run.
Wow. At this stage in your career, how do you define your role as a mentor, steward, and strategist? What does good leadership at the board level look like?
Well, I think I pretty much answered that in the last question as well. It's a mix of everything. Boards, for the longest time, boards were seen as having principally a governance role. They were policemen. I think that's misguided because at the end of the day, the boards run companies. Boards are the representatives of shareholders. And so if you just look at the corporate governance, it's the board's responsibility to do that. Now, boards don't have to execute, but helping shape strategy, supporting management, backing management, giving management air cover, helping management develop teams, those are board responsibilities. So how do you do that in a way that management feels empowered? Management feels that they have the board's back. To get the big things done is important. But at the same time, boards need to be an honest mirror. So if it does turn out that managements are not performing, then the boards are responsible for taking the appropriate actions in that context.
And maybe a bonus question, and how would you, in your point of view, balance between a board that is more micromanaging or more hands-on? How will you be able to give some examples of how?
Well, again, I told you, it's, my only example in recent times is the DBS board. I thought the DBS board relationship with management was exemplary.
Yeah.
And it came from one important thing, complete trust and an open kimono environment. So my one mantra to my whole team was, all of you are free to reach out to the board. In fact, you should reach out to the board because the board is free consultants. They will tell you from their wisdom. But at the same time, we must make sure that the board is never surprised. So we must always simplify for the board so the board understands exactly what we're talking about and what we're saying. Just saying it was in my board papers on page 470 is not good enough. Right? Boards can never go through that detail and remember. So the onus is on you to really open the kimono and tell the board, hey, you should think about this. We are doing this, you should know, etc., etc. So when you build that environment of trust, then you get that balance right.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You have spoken about the importance of purpose, constructive capitalism. How do you keep that alive in a non-executive roles where you are not involved in the day-to-day?
Well, actually, that's not the hardest part, because the idea behind constructive capitalism doesn't come from the day-to-day. It comes from the sense of purpose. It comes from your strategy agenda. What are you trying to be? When you set up KPIs for the management team, or you set up KPIs, you've got to be very clear about what is the impact, what is the company trying to do, what is the reason for this company to exist. And then you got to accept that the KPIs are going to be, framed in the context of that, true north.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm feeling that for the just past 15-30 minutes, I'm learning a lot just by asking you this question. Thank you, Piyush.
You're welcome.
Let's move on to the next question, reflection on leadership, AI, and continuous improvement. As you look ahead, what are your thoughts on the future of continuous improvement in a world of Gen AI, automation, and hyper disruptions?
I think the role of continuous improvement gets even more exemplified and amplified in this world. Why do I say that? I say that principally because now the tools and the ability to actually continue to tweak and improve, you can democratize and socialize in the hands of the people who are closest to the customer journey. In theory, you could always do that, but there were friction and bottlenecks. You had to go back to some technology department. You had to go work with various other people. In today's day and age, between the new technology, between AI and Gen AI, between experimentation engines, every team at the coalface has the ability to do this. And you can actually make it happen in real time. So in that real time, bringing all the right people together, bringing them in place, right, where the work is happening, using the tools to continue to get on a flywheel of a cycle of continuous improvement, the opportunity is profound, much more than the opportunity used to be in the past.
Wow. And question, the second last, what qualities do you believe tomorrow's leaders will need to thrive, and how can they stay grounded in purpose amid all the noise?
I think today's Gen Z is often starting at a different position. They are grounded in purpose. Now, whether that stays in the future, who knows? But for the time being, I think most Gen Z want to make a difference. The biggest question we get asked when we go to placement these days is, what is the purpose of the company? What is the intent? How does it align with my intent? And so I'm less concerned about the idea of doing real things. People want to do that. In fact, the young people want to make impact. But to the early part of your question about what attributes? Frankly, I don't think they change very much. And I've sort of been in the public forums talking about my mantras around it. I define it in 6 I's. Individual accountability. I think as you give more and more power and autonomy in a democratized world to the young people also have to step up and take accountability. You can't say, I want to make impact, but when the rubber hits the road, it's not my problem. So you have to take initiative. Like I said, the power of today's technology is you can lead a lot more, but then you should do that. What is your outbox? What is the agenda that you want to create with all the tools that you have? And linked to that is innovation. Today, you can go back and think through everything that's done and find a better way to do it. That's what startups do. Every startup says, hey, this is how things were doing, there's friction in this, it's inefficient, it's ineffective, can I do it better? Well, every young leader should be thinking of that. How can I innovate and question the status quo? I think one of the big things that is going to be critical, always was, but even more now, is the fourth I, which I call inspiration. You have to take people with you. And this is a part of this is empathy, part of it is communication. It's a thing which a lot of young people don't focus on enough. And I'm really worried that with ChatGPT, even written communication somebody else does for you, outsourcing. But verbal communication, being able to talk to groups of people, large audiences, inspire and take people with you, super critical, and will continue to be. The fifth I call integrity. So you must know yourself. And integrity means being true to yourself. You must be rooted in what makes you tick. And then you've got to be consistent with this is, what makes me tick, I will express that. The last I call intent. Now it goes back to purpose. You've got to be clear about what is the real value you're trying to bring. So if you have some mix of these, I think that will help leaders in the future as much as I think it helped leaders in the past.
Wow, that's well coined, 6I. And bonus question also, are you looking at actually publishing a book based on that?
No, I don't have any plans to publish a book at this point in time, maybe someday.
Yeah. And finally, as we celebrate Kaizen Institute 40th anniversary, what message would you like to share with the next generations of leaders who believe in learning, experimenting, and changing the world for the better?
Well, I think I said lesson number one is there is always room for improvement. No matter how good you think you are, the situation changes, the technology changes, people's needs and desires change, people's bar changes because they're now seeing other industries do things. So you have to be restless about improvement. You have to figure that this is a Kaizen. It's a continuous journey. It's not a I fixed it and therefore I can go sleep. There's always room for improvement. So you've got to embrace that and continue to improve. And my second message goes back to the previous question. Today, the way organizations have evolved and the way technology has evolved, you have a remarkable opportunity to make impact. You have to grasp and seize that opportunity. Just as you want to make impact by starting up and doing a new company, you can make the same impact in a large company if you treat yourself as a startup within the company. Entrepreneurship. So make use of that opportunity.
And thank you, Piyush, for the deeply thoughtful and inspiring conversation. Your journey from banking transformation to digital leadership to stewarding institution of learning and sustainability truly reflects what it means to live the spirit of Kaizen. We wish you the very best in your next chapter and thank you for being a beacon of bold, purposeful leadership.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure doing this interview because, like I said, I'm a big believer in the Kaizen approach. Thank you.
Thank you.